This revision video is looking at the two texts we've been covering this week. As you know, the learning intentions are to examine how a text creates a preferred reader. And what that means is every text has an ideology attached to it, and every text creates ideas that reinforce that ideology. So what we're going to do is look at both the texts and see how lexical choices primarily create that meaning, and also how they represent that. So the language frameworks we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at lexis, and we're going to be looking at syntax. What that means, as you've learned in the lessons, is words and how words are put together. So how phrases, clauses, and sentences are put together. You've done this at GCSE before, but we're just going to be a little bit more detailed in terms of how a text does it. So the way I'll annotate it and go through it, this could be a revision video for you, or it could be a way to reinforce something you've just done. Hopefully, looking back on this through the year, you'll be able to see how all of the language frameworks fit together. Right now, we're just looking at lexis and we're just looking at grammar. Specifically, we're looking at syntax. I know these technical terms right now sound quite strange, but once you've got the habit of it, it become a lot easier. So what we'll do is we'll go through that. So the first text we're going to look at is an article in the Daily Star, which you've read already, and you can access it on the website if you need to download another copy. And we're going to look at this in terms of lexis, and hopefully this is going to be a useful comparison with the Boris Johnson speech, because they both do similar things, but with different ways of doing it. So Daily Star is a tabloid newspaper. So what that means is it's a commercially focused newspaper that is aimed at getting a wide readership as possible. The readability of texts in the Daily Star is incredibly high. Sentence construction is relatively not very complex, and vocabulary or lexical choices are pretty mainstream, and there's not going to be many Latinate polysyllabic vocabulary words in there. You might have a lot of hyperbole, as you often get in a text in a tabloid newspaper, and also sensationalism. So from the point of view of how we can prove that with language, that's what this video lecture is going to be about. If you need to pause at any point, if I've said a particular concept, then just obviously pause it and have a look through the grammar glossary and look at what I mean by that. So we're going to talk about representation. We're also going to be talking about lexical choice a great deal here. It's an expectation that you've already understood what a noun phrase is. I can go over that again. It's really important in terms of noun phrases being a key syntactic feature in most texts, in fact, in most sentences. Noun phrases are necessary for meaning because they are things, and we use language to talk about things. If we didn't have things, then we'd only be talking about actions, but we don't do that. We talk about things. So even in the first sentence, B and Q, that's a thing. You know, it's an initialism. It's the proper noun for B and Q. I'm not quite sure what B and Q actually stands for. Maybe somebody can find that out for me and look it up. To offer snowflakes lessons on how to change light bulbs and clean a toilet. So even in just the headline, the variety of nouns that we've got, snowflakes, lessons, light bulbs, toilet. So some of them are singular, some of them are plural, some of them are common. One has been capitalised. We've got what we call an orthographic choice to capitalise it, to make it more intense. We can class that as a type of orthographic, or what's called graphological approach to making something stand out. And in this case, it gives it a particular intonation. Obviously, in the written mode, you can't shout because it's writing, it's written on the page, but you can make it seem like it's simulated shouting. So the fact that it's implied that lessons is being shouted by using capital letters, again, all of these choices all work together to create a particular meaning. So a journalist at the Daily Star is the producer of this text. The intended audience, the intended reader, or the ideal reader, if we were to really sum it up, as we've talked about in lessons, is somebody who's probably more conservative leaning and possibly someone who's over the age of 40. That's not to say that you can't be under the age of 40 and read this or agree with it or even find any particular political agreement with it. But the fact is, it's designed as a particular product for a tabloid newspaper. So one big thing that we've got straight away, and obviously we mentioned this in the lesson, is what we call perjuration, or a pejorative term. And we can see that here with, obviously, snowflakes. So a snowflake, in the literal sense, denotation of a snowflake, frozen water that's in a particular pattern. Obviously, anyone doing science will be able to tell me why it's called a snowflake and why it has that unique pattern. Semantic-wise, i.e. the meaning of the word, snowflake has been pejorated. It's a pejorative form, and what it means here is anybody who, for example, is younger, can't do what would be deemed as simple DIY. So for that, you can kind of assume, or you can imply, you can decode, you can infer and decode that the ideal reader of this text is probably a homeowner, because DIY is actually really tricky. Changing light bulbs aren't necessarily most difficult DIY tasks, but it kind of links into a greater concept of DIY. And obviously owning a house is key for that. So it presupposes, and this is where we'll talk about what's called pragmatics later in the year. The presupposition is the reader and the producer, the person who wrote it and published it, both have a presupposition that says you should be able to do these things. And there are all sorts of reasons why they would want to do that. They want to make it seem common sense and normal. And then they amplify the idea that you'd be an idiot, or you'd be a moron, or you'd be unintelligent if you can't do these things, because the noun choice is they're a snowflake if they can't do it. And you can probably find the definition of snowflake. Obviously, we talked about it in class already, but to be a snowflake is to be someone who deems themselves to be really entitled and really important and unique, a bit like a snowflake. So it's a metaphor in itself, because you're not literally a snowflake. But also you can easily melt. So from the point of view of criticism, you can't take criticism. So to imply that B&Q would have to offer you a lesson on changing light bulbs and cleaning a toilet, it's putting you in a very, if you are deemed a snowflake, putting you in a very negative light. And from that side of things, we can see how it's stereotyping younger people, it's stereotyping people who maybe just bought a house because they're going to B&Q, so new homeowners, that sort of thing. Lessons on how to change light bulbs and clean a toilet. So from that side of things, we've got the nouns highlighted, and when you read it, you think this is ridiculous. Why should anybody have a lesson on that? And that is the intended representation that the writer is going for. They're equating somebody who's a brand new homeowner with both a snowflake, i.e. a piece of frozen water that will fall apart. They're worthless, they're useless, that sort of thing. They don't have the everyday skills. You've heard that phrase, the university of life. That's another example of one of those idioms that means you can't live in the real world. Again, all of these metaphors are hyperbolic. They're all designed to insult. They're all designed to denigrate this group of people. Why is that important for ideology? And the Daily Star is because they are writing for a particular type of reader who would have these views already. And that's what we mean by presupposition, because it's agreed, it's a belief that's agreed before the text actually creates that meaning. So if we have a look at some of the noun phrases that are particularly useful for us, I think from the point of view of hyperbole, which we talked about already, the fact that B&Q have had to have an army of staff, again, another example of metaphorical language. It's not literally an army. B&Q staff members do not have guns. They don't have to obey the Geneva Convention. They're not literally an army. And we've got the noun phrase here with the determiner, an army of staff. When you're looking at noun phrases, you're interested in, firstly, is it definite or is it indefinite? In this example, we've got the indefinite article being used, an army of staff. Obviously, this is where the spelling of an comes with an N, because if the succeeding word that comes after the determiner, if it starts with a vowel sound, as in the A, that is phonologically requiring the an. So that's why we have the spelling of a versus an, which is obvious. I'm not going to go over too much about that. So it's an indefinite army, meaning they've just had to create an army. And so that implies that B&Q have had to go out of their way to find an army. Not to buy the army, not the army, because it was the definite article, the army of staff. That would be specifically talking about them. But this, in this case, is like the writer is saying B&Q have had to create their own army. And by using the indefinite article, an army, it says that they shouldn't have had to do that. They shouldn't have had to go out of their way to actually create an army of staff. Again, it's hyperbolic. Again, army in itself is a collective noun. The reader would understand that the meaning there is that it's obviously people who've been trained. So staff members have been trained to combat the idiocy of these snowflakes. Again, I can't even describe this text without talking about all the ideology that goes into it, because it is so loaded in these terms that have the connotations of anger at young people. Why should we have to train an army to make young people do it? To teach snowflakes how to change a light bulb, turn an oven, and clean toilets. So again, you've got the rule of three. You've got three noun phrases, again, following after each other. So you've done the rule of three at GCSE, I imagine. Oh, the highlight's gone wrong. Turn an oven and clean toilets. So you've got the rule of three. Change, turn, clean. In this case, we've got three verb phrases. We're going to talk a lot more about verb phrases as the years go on. But effectively, what you need to remember is we've got light bulb, oven, and toilets. So they're all concrete nouns. They're all physical things. The reader can imagine exactly what these things are. And in terms of representation, that would imply to the reader that a snowflake, and I'll keep using inverted commas, and it's probably really annoying, but I am using it as a quotation of what this text says, is that they can't even do simple things like that. There are all sorts of reasons why somebody can't clean a toilet or change a light bulb. There are so many disabilities that could stop people doing that, and a lot of these courses that staff would have are actually based around ability and based around are people actually physically able to do it. So you might have a little bit of prejudice in this text because it's precluding, it's ignoring any disabled people, or you could just class it as they just want to patronise and they want to say that younger people can't do these things. Again, the ideal reader of this sort of text would say, yeah, young people can't do these things, they can't do the basics. I can, I've been to the University of Life. Whatever that means. Again, all these fixed expressions. Right, next paragraph. DIY giant, B&Q, hopes to get more millennials through the door by making basic tasks seem even simpler. So we can talk a lot about this in terms of the idiomatic nature of it. So we've got the phrase through the door. Get rid of that. Through the door, i.e. to increase the number of customers they have. But you've also got the fact it's described as a DIY giant. So that tells us, ideologically, to view something as a giant, it doesn't just mean it's big, it means it's powerful. So the Daily Star is saying that this company, in all its infinite power, is having to still look after young people. As you'll know, a millennial is somebody my age. If you're doing A-levels now, you are not a millennial, so it's not aimed at you. And yes, there is a certain level of anger in my voice when I'm describing being called a snowflake. But again, it's a form of stereotype in a particular age group. And what it means is we can't do basic tasks. So by making basic tasks seem even simpler, we've got two adjectives here that we can look at. So we'll just do that now. So if we have a look at this example now in the paragraph that starts, DIY giant B&Q hopes to get more millennials through the door by making basic tasks even simpler. Firstly, let's highlight the nouns that are being used. So specifically, we're looking at millennials through the door by making basic tasks seem even simpler. So firstly, let's think about what we call modification. And the first example we'll look at here is in the noun phrase, basic tasks. So from the point of view of a text having particular ideas and particular meanings that are created, big one here is the common noun tasks. Oops. Mainly because, as you can see, tasks, what are the tasks? We've already mentioned them. So we've got references to things that are already in the text. Okay? These are called anaphors. Anaphoric or anaphora, you may have already come across in poetry, and often anaphors are referred to by the same repeating sentence, same repeating phrase in a particular sentence. So at the beginning of the sentence, you have the same phrase being used again and again and again. For any sort of non-fiction text, when we're looking at A-level, anaphors or anaphora doesn't have to be poetic. It doesn't even have to be at the beginning of a sentence. It can be references to anything else in the text. And as we go through the year, we'll learn that this is a particular element of what's called discourse. And if you want to have a look on the website already and look at the discourse level of the language frameworks of lapdogs, you'll be able to see that it's quite complex, but it's what's called cohesion. So what we were looking at, we were specifically looking at modification. So modification in a text tells us how things are being described. So millennials are being, forced to come through to B&Q. They're being put through the door, and people who work for B&Q are making basic tasks seem even simpler. We've got the regular common noun that's plural, tasks, and it's being modified by the adjective basic. Why is that important? Firstly, because English adjectives normally will be pre-modifying the noun. Now, we've covered this in class already in terms of the order of adjectives and how adjectives will modify something. So we call it modification, we don't call it description, because they're modifying the meaning of tasks. This implies, by saying it's a basic task, it's not just, firstly, it's a base adjective, it's not a comparative or a superlative adjective, whereas simpler is a comparative adjective because it's got that er suffix on the end. And if you want to look in the morphology section of the grammar section on the website, you'll be able to find a lot of that. It's a really important aspect of grammar. We've got the idea that basic tasks are still too hard. So this, again, presupposes that millennials, that younger people, are unable to do even the basic tasks. And by putting the adverb even, it again intensifies this idea and implies the idea. So there's an implicature, there's an implication that millennials are unintelligent or useless, however you want to describe it. So we've got pre-modification of tasks with basic, and we've got the use of the comparative adjective simpler. Because if you can't do something that's simple, then that implies you are simple. So by these lexical choices, it's saying that B&Q have had an army of staff to deal with all these basic, simple, unintelligent people. Are you offended yet? Probably not. Who knows? Well, I've called you basic. That'd be quite offensive, but I wouldn't do that. The next example we'll look at is another noun phrase that jumps out as really significant in terms of how it portrays younger people. Again, we'll look at this in terms of modification, and we'll look at it in terms of noun choice. We've got here a series of idiot-proof how-to videos explaining every step of a DIY project will be posted online. Oh, a teacher posting something online to help students. Is that so bad? This article says yes. It implies that they shouldn't need it because it's basic and it should only be for idiots, as it implies here with this compound adjective, idiot-proof. So, I love this article, isn't it? It's got loads in. Firstly, let's think about noun phrases once again. We've got our indefinite article, a, so it's telling us there's one thing they've made. Series obviously denotes that there's multiple videos because we've got that like that. Why is that relevant? Well, it's mentioned right at the beginning of the noun phrase. It didn't say a couple of idiot-proof, it didn't say a number of idiot-proof videos, it puts a series of idiot-proof how-to videos right at the beginning of the noun phrase, so that really emphasises they've had to do multiple videos. Making videos takes a lot of effort. You've got to also, as we know, put a lot of emotional energy into it to make it engaging. A corporation will spend millions of pounds on this sort of thing, and it's part of their marketing strategy. So to criticise and say, well, millennials are idiots for needing these videos, misses the point. B&Q are trying to help people, and they're trying to, sell more products by giving that wraparound service. But this article doesn't call them customers; it calls them idiots, because of this compound adjective, as you can see, to be idiot-proof. So it's a compound adjective. In this case, it's hyphenated because it suggests that the videos, even an idiot could do it because it's idiot-proof. Again, the modification is patronising. The modification is a pejorative. There we are. And then we've got the little quotation, how-to videos. Let's look at punctuation here. Let's look at the graphological aspect of it. How-to videos, as you'll know from all the YouTube videos you've ever watched, incredibly common, incredibly normal. I remember once I got a flat tyre in my car. I was in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales. What do you do? Went onto YouTube, finally managed to get enough data so I could actually watch it. I was in the Dales, I was almost in a mountain. And then watched a how-to video on how to replace a tyre. And within 2 hours, I'm not saying I was good, but within 2 hours I was able to fix my tyre. So how-to videos are vital for some people. They're really, really useful. But look here how it's got the quotation marks around it. In this case, really adding that irony. So often punctuation marks can show an ironic tone coming from the writer. And what this does here is say they shouldn't need a how-to video. They should know how to do it. They should know how to change a light bulb. I can tell you there are some people who don't know how to change a light bulb. There are some people who can't do it, and that's just normal. But this writer is saying everybody should be able to do it. So the ideology is that an able-bodied person who owns a house is in the right. That's the ideology that underpins it. Videos, obviously you've got the regular common noun, plural in this case, explaining every step of a DIY project. Right, noun phrases once again, these are important. Come back now later. Every step of a DIY project. So 2 noun phrases here that together have a particular effect. Again, it's highlighting this idea that younger people are useless. Why are they useless? Because they need a step-by-step guide. But the fact it's got the determiner every here, it implies there are many steps and they shouldn't need to have them. But they do. A DIY project, again, it assumes that the reader knows what DIY is. It understands the initialism of DIY, obviously means do it yourself. This is where you would make the distinction between an initialism and an acronym, because an acronym, you class it as a full word in itself. You could pronounce as a full word. And if you pronounce DIY, not the initial letters, if you pronounced it as a full word, it would be die, which doesn't make sense. Obviously, it's not that. If a DIY project will be posted online, such as getting the right products, how to clean walls, how to sand them, and even basics, again, repetition of this, like how to clear a room for painting. Unless you have done all of these things, it's perfectly normal to actually watch a video to explain these things. But this article is dripping with with sarcasm. It's dripping with a patronizing tone. And it does it by listing listing all the things. So clean walls, products, basics. Again, the denotation of basic is just, the actual bread and butter of the task, what needs to be done, but the connotation of the task. So lexical choice here, basic, an idiot proof in every step. The lexical choices here, through the nouns and the noun phrases that are being picked, all have the connotation of anybody should be able to do it because they're basic. But by implication, younger people can't do it because they're, like we've said, incapable, useless, unintelligent. Are you offended by that? Possibly. Maybe that's part of the purpose of the text, to offend people. Who knows? Another example of modification that we've got that's easy to spot, we've got another adjective being used, lazy barbecue enthusiasts. So again, lazy is pre-modifying barbecue enthusiasts. So we've got, in terms of the noun phrase, lazy modifies barbecue, modifies enthusiasts. So pre-modification here is telling us that anybody who likes barbecues but they're lazy, they should go to B&Q because they'll be able to put the grill in their dishwasher to save scrubbing. That's actually a very appealing idea. While more cordless tools will save plugging in so many cables. So we've got, again, pre-modification of tools, and cables is being pre-modified by many. Dishwasher, again, another example. There is an interesting word. Firstly, because it tells us whose it is. Why is that important? It's because it refers back to, where's it gone? The idiots. They've got cordless tools. There isn't a pronoun. It's what we call a possessive determiner. So we've got pronouns they, he, she, me, you, I. We've got determiners, which normally we class as either articles, so a or the. And then we've also got possessive determiners. Their, his, her, my. But these are only determiners if they're modifying a noun. So they're saying that they belong to something. So possessive, possession, you'll know that apostrophes show possession normally, or contraction. So their dishwasher, we've got it being referenced there. And this is another example of what we'll talk a lot later in the year of what we call cohesion. Because there implies, and it refers to other people. So if I were to draw some lines that say who it refers to the idiots. For those who have never figured it out, that's them again. Can't say it particularly, but yeah, same idea. So they've got this cohesive link between these ideas. So it implies throughout the idea that customers need these things, but the article is saying they shouldn't need them. They should be, so idiot-proof that they shouldn't have to watch a video to explain it. And then we've got a final paragraph. And for those who have never figured out if their home is one with low or high pressure water, they won't now end up buying the wrong kind of tap as a new design adapts automatically, saving up to 40% water use and reducing metered water and fuel bills. This doesn't really sound like an article anymore. It sounds a little bit like an advertisement. Possibly we've got a little bit of influence from B&Q and the way this original text was presented to the Daily Star. Possibly it was an advert, or maybe it was a press release. So we've got the Daily Star using the concept of originally blaming younger people for being idiots, blaming younger people for being useless. But as the article develops, what we learn is that the article actually is a little bit of advertising for all these new things that B&Q has, because we've got the modification techniques, the adjective techniques of advertising. A lightweight, save up to 40%, reducing metered water and fuel bills. Got a lot of these would not look out of place in an advertisement. So as you're analysing this text and you're annotating it, these are the things you need to think about. So proper nouns. So nouns, really important aspect of noun phrases, of course, because you can't have a noun phrase without some sort of head noun, the head noun that is the main word in that phrase. So think about proper nouns. So proper nouns, the official name of something. So B&Q, obviously that's one. Snowflakes would not count as a proper noun. It's not capitalised and it is a pejorative term. What common nouns are used? So again, what like normal everyday nouns that aren't the official name of something. There are loads of them. What adjectives are used to describe these terms, to modify these terms? Abstract nouns. So that's something to look at as well. How do they refer to people? So are they used to blame or are they used to equate? So as you're reading the text, highlight them and see what you spot. Pejoratives, obviously we've talked a lot about this. Everything from idiot-proof to snowflake is what we call dysphonistic. And if you, when you're in the article, if you click that link, it'll take you through to one of the pages to talk about semantics and what we call dysphonism. Ultimately, it means the opposite of euphemism. So if you use a word to make it sound worse, so you use the phrase snowflake, use the word snowflake, you mean it as an insult. Collective nouns, obviously we've got army, obviously we've got snowflakes, things like that. Yeah, so specifically looking at nouns, looking at naming. As a follow-up to this video, I would recommend watching in the representation section. There is a video on naming as an aspect of representation. So if you watch that video, it'll really, really help. Next text we're going to look at is the Boris Johnson speech, which has a different purpose. This is a written representation of the spoken mode. So it's spoken because it was a speech. If you click the link in the article, you can actually watch it. And the tweet that it was attached to had its own little introduction. So when you watch that, you can see how the speech was originally designed to be delivered. It is meant to be a spoken mode. It's a speech. But as you can probably guess, yes, there was a speechwriter involved. So what we've done is we've transcribed it, put it into regular standard English so you can see it. So this is from the 5th of September 2019, and this is going to be a read-along of the script. What we'll do is we'll talk about some of the key representation issues that come up. And again, we'll be looking at, just like we did with the Daily Star article, we'll be looking at naming, and we'll be looking at modifying. So how Boris Johnson refers to his opponents, refers to his audience, who he has ratified, he's acknowledged that they are listening to him. If you look at that picture, he's facing us. So in terms of graphology, the tweet is written in standard English. He is referring to a particular topic from Parliament, and he is making it clear that he's now then saying you, meaning the listener, the British public. So firstly, we've got our greeting. Obviously, this isn't reciprocated because as a listener, you can't say hi back to him. But let's just talk about that in the first place. Hi, folks. So the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is using the word folks as his introduction. So denotation of that just means people, but the connotation of saying folks as opposed to anything else is incredibly informal. So the register that Boris Johnson is trying to evoke already, the tone of his spoken language and how he's trying to come across in his discourse is friendly. And this is a particular lexical choice that he's picked because he wants to come across as friendly, therefore he's chosen an informal register. Likewise, first sentence, compound sentence, and it's very general. A lot has happened this week. So if we think about noun phrases once again, a lot, we've got the indefinite article a, and we've got lot. This really generalises what's happened in Parliament. So he's really simplifying it. So one of the representation techniques here, he's simplifying something. This week tells us, of course, when it happened, and I wanted to update you, in this case, the second person pronoun you. He's speaking to everybody who's watching this video, by which he means his ideal listener is someone who would vote Conservative or someone who wouldn't vote Conservative, but he still wants to win them over. He wants to persuade them. I've been negotiating over the past 5 weeks to get us a new deal. Once again, lexical choice, we've got contraction of I have into I've. Again, just like folks and a lot, it's simplified language, it's informal. The register is designed to be very conversational. He wants to sound like he's on your level. He's being friendly. He doesn't want to come across as very authoritative. I've been negotiating over the past 5 weeks to get us a new deal. EU leaders were willing to negotiate a deal because they knew we are going to leave on October 31st. Deal or no deal? Deal or no deal? If you'll know, it's an allusion, cultural reference to the game show. We've got repetition of a deal. Again, a deal, a lot, deal or no deal, a new deal. In terms of these references, all link back to the idea in terms of a deal. It's one thing, it's indefinite. It's not been decided yet. We don't have the deal yet. So the meaning is he's still fighting for a particular deal. You've got the modification of deal with new, and then you've got the modification of deal with no here. So he's trying to make this seem very straightforward, very simplistic. It doesn't say specifically what type of deal it is because this particular text is designed to be shared on Twitter. So the recipient of this video hasn't got a lot of time to watch it. They are watching short form media. It's meant to be catchy. It's meant to be very engaging. Therefore, he's not going to go into too much detail at the beginning. Last night, Jeremy Corbyn and others voted to wreck the chance of a deal. So lexical choice is here really important. We've got the verb wreck, which is hyperbolic, and it's designed to say, denotation-wise, that Jeremy Corbyn wants to destroy something. That has the connotation that what he wanted to wreck, what he wanted to destroy, was a good thing, because he's not voted to attack something, he's voted to wreck it. Once you've wrecked something, as we know, if you have a shipwreck or you wreck a ship, it's sunk and it can't be fixed. So the connotation is that Jeremy Corbyn and his party at the time, obviously I'm now speaking in 2020, and Jeremy Corbyn is no longer the Prime Minister, no longer the leader of the Tory party. I can't talk. The Labour Party. So again, this is saying at the time, that's what he wanted to do. But if we think of just this noun phrase as well, Jeremy Corbyn and others, so we've got the emphasis on Jeremy Corbyn being the leader of this gang, and others. So that collective noun, others, doesn't name them, but it does present them by putting it at the beginning of the sentence, making it the subject of the sentence. It puts them in a sort of active, almost criminal position. They are doing something to wreck something. What are they wrecking? They're wrecking the chance of a new deal, of a deal. So again, to wreck this abstract noun, the chance of a new deal, it doesn't say that Boris actually had a deal. It says that he had the chance of a deal. Next set of noun phrases we can talk about is after that sentence. Their new law tries to force the government to go to Brussels, beg for another delay until 2020 or for as long as Brussels demands. So we've got, once again, the noun phrase. It's pre-modifying the word delay and telling us and implying that there shouldn't be any more delays because this isn't just a delay, this is another delay. So he's trying to, he is pretty successfully in the speech. He is saying that the delays have been constant, the delays have been too many, and by using the word another, it also creates this idea that it's an unnecessary delay, and that's just by looking at the noun phrase itself. This is then emphasised by the next modification adjective that we've got that's pre-modifying here, another pointless delay. So the determiner another is referencing delay, and then he doubles downs on that, or doubles down on it, and then refers to it again and uses another anaphoric reference. People don't want another pointless delay. So in this case, another is modifying pointless, pointless is modifying delay. Why is that important? He's done it, it's a speech designed to persuade people. He's got the repetition of this. Even the fact he's, using words like folks and people. People is a very general term, what you might call the lay person, the normal person in society, not a specialist, not an expert, not an EU law expert. It's just people. So he's positioning himself as this speech is for anyone who considers Brexit to be too difficult to understand. Brexit is, too complex. And what we don't want is another delay. And by making it, modifying it and saying it's pointless, that explicitly attacks what Corbyn has done. It continues in his particular rhetorical strategy. So we've got the rhetoric of he is in charge, he's an authority figure, mixed with the idea that he's an everyman, he wants to be everybody's friend, he wants to be part of the people, part of the folks. Brussels could demand that I hand over billions of your money. So I've highlighted this in particular because it's interesting how he equates himself as being the person in charge of your money. So you've got the first person pronoun I that he's using, and then we've got the phrase hand over. It almost links this discourse of the Brussels or the EU are like bank robbers, that they've got us at gunpoint to hand something over. It's really particularly true. It's a phrasal verb that's got a particular connotation of crime here. Billions of your money. So again, another possessive determiner, your money. So it says you will lose out your money. He's making that clear in return for this pointless delay. Once again, pointless is pre-modifying the word delay. So when the reader thinks there's a delay, they then modify that by the adjective that goes before. Then we've got wonderful little description of what he wants to do. I refuse to do this. So short, simple, single clause sentence that is linking the idea that he wants to allow it. He refuses to do it. I refuse to do this. In this case, what is this? Allow the EU to take your money. So again, that reference going back to what he said previously is another anaphoric reference. He refuses to hand over the money. Carrying on, we've got more blaming of Jeremy Corbyn. We've got more rhetorical attacking of his opponent. Last night, Jeremy Corbyn voted to stop you, the public. So this is interesting because he's explicitly saying who he wants his listener to be. And he's choosing the word public because, again, it's the idea of this informal, friendly approach to the public. What we've got here is what we call an appositive. And an appositive is whenever you've got straight after the first noun phrase, you've got another noun phrase separated by a comma. And what that does is tells us who he's referring to. So stop you, the public. This appositive puts you in the position of you represent all of the public. Now, this is interesting from an implied meaning perspective, because what it tells us is that Boris Johnson is saying you have the will of the people. You, as in my listener right now, you represent all of the views of the public. And because he wants to persuade you, therefore he wants to persuade the public. Jeremy Corbyn voted to stop you, the public, deciding this. So one thing we'll look at very, very shortly, and we'll do a little sneak peek now, is what we call active and passive voice. And that's interesting in a text like this, because obviously a political text that's designed to persuade people, or it's designed to attack people, or be, to assess or judge somebody, tells us what that person has done. Jeremy Corbyn voted to stop you. So firstly, we've got the verb choice stop, which obviously is a very negative connotation. And then we've got voted. If a subject, i.e. Jeremy Corbyn, does something, this is what we call the active voice. And we'll come across this a lot more as the year goes on. Active voice is a sentence type where the subject does the thing. So Matt laughed, Matt ate, Jeremy Corbyn voted. He is what we call the agent, the doer of the thing. He's the person who did it. So if he's the person who did it, and what did he do? He stopped us. Then he's portrayed as an enemy. He's portrayed as someone who's done something wrong. Once again, we've got he has voted to destroy negotiations. So that what we call syntactic parallelism, the same sort of subject verb choice appearing once again. He has voted. So it's active because he did it. He's the subject pronoun there, he. And again, he's referring to Jeremy Corbyn. Voted to destroy negotiations. So firstly, this is a metaphor. You can't destroy a negotiation. To destroy something would involve a criminal act. It would be a violent act. He's not done that. The destruction here is rhetorical. So he's using hyperbole to say that Jeremy Corbyn has ruined it, he's wrecked it, he's destroyed it. Again, all of these belong to the same semantic field. Again, we'll talk about semantic field very, very soon. To delay, again, for no reason, and to stop you deciding we delay or not. It seems to me he doesn't trust you to make this decision. So you, we, me, you. He's saying, by using all of these pronouns, either first person pronouns, me, or second person pronouns, you, or the first person plural pronoun, we, is an inclusive rhetorical technique here. He's saying we're all on the same page. It's a rhetorical device. He's saying we can do it. He's trying to decide if we can delay the vote or not. And how does Boris refer back to that? I do trust you. So we've got a contrast here. By saying Jeremy Corbyn doesn't trust you in this decision, he says, in contrast, I do trust you. And what's interesting here is how he uses, again, another short, simple sentence. There's only one clause. Got the verb trust. And trust, as you know, has the denotation and the connotation of positivity. Trust is really important for political branding. The idea that a politician has trust, or the politician believes in the ethics of politics, of their politics, is really, really important. So that verb is chosen because it wants to really emphasize, I'm a trustworthy Prime Minister, I trust you, you're the people, you're the folks. Again, all of these lexical choices are part of an overall strategy to brand the listener as somebody who is good, someone who's ethical, someone who'll make the right choice. It would be totally wrong for Parliament to force another pointless delay. Again, this repetition of pointlessness, this repetition of you cannot have these delays, another unnecessary delay. He's really emphasizing it. And again here, pointless is pre-modifying delay. So if you want Brexit sorted out before the 31st of October, speaking now on the 15th of July 2020, it's not been sorted out, then please ask your MP to vote on Monday so you can have your say on who goes to Brussels to sort this out, me or Jeremy Corbyn. So this is ultimately down to what he wants you to do. Again, you've got the instructions speaking to the second person, his listener. We've got the possessive determiner, your say, and we've got the second person pronoun, you. Final thing we'll talk about is that conversational tone that he's implied all throughout this text. sort this out. The idea that people like Boris can sort something out, something as complex as Brexit, can just go and sort it out. We'll look at how the noun phrase here is important. He just calls it this. So to sort this out, as you'll know, it's still not been sorted out. So the idea that he uses the word this tells us that it's simplified. He's simplifying one of the most complicated political and diplomatic negotiations that we've had outside of wartime. And he's just changed it into just sort this out. So now we'll just do a quick comparison of both texts. First thing we're going to compare is the use of sentence variety. So first thing we'll look at in the Boris text is there's a wider variety of simple sentences used for effect. So for example, I refuse to do this and I do trust you. Both of these placed just after longer complex sentences, whereas in the Daily Star article, everything's either a complex sentence or a compound sentence. One thing in particular we can see here in the Boris article is we've got the use of asides. Now, an aside in a sentence is another way of talking about complex sentences. And in this example, we've got, my view is that, comma, if Parliament tries to force another pointless delay, comma, and I refuse to do that, comma, then voters should decide what to happen next. So ultimately, the main clause in this sentence is, my view is that voters should decide what happens next. But because he's got these asides within the sentence, in this complex sentence, which are dependent clauses, they depend on everything else in the sentence to make sense, he's adding a lot of description in terms of his thought process and also the process of what Parliament would do if it's another pointless delay. Again, once again, emphasising the pointlessness of it by using that adjective pointless. If is something that we're going to talk about in the next week's lessons when we talk about Churchill and one of his speeches. If clauses are really important to show cause and effect, to show the reality of things, to show how things are forced to happen. If one thing happens, then another thing can't happen or another thing must happen. So we've got lots of ifs, but in the Daily Star article, there's no ifs per se, but we do have complex sentences that show listing. So listing in a complex sentence normally has the effect of emphasizing how many things there are. Big thing here is this one that we've already looked at. A series of idiot-proof how-to videos explaining every step of a DIY project will be posted online, and then dash, such as, and then we have the list that begins. So such as getting the right products, how to clean walls, how to sand them, and even basics like how to clear the room for painting. So this long complex sentence has a list of things that really amplifies and emphasizes all of the normal, straightforward things that snowflakes should be able to do. So again, both these texts talk about different things, but they both use complex sentences. Another contrast we can make is how the reader is positioned in the text. So in the Boris speech, he uses what we call synthetic personalization, i.e. speaking to the reader as if they really were there. I do trust you. You, obviously the second person pronoun, is speaking to you as a listener and the public at large. But in the Daily Star article, we don't have second person. It's not you. It's not your house. It's not your DIY problems. It's third person. So, for example, DIY strugglers. So that one is saying you might be a DIY struggler yourself, but we're just referring to them generally. So they are going to be in third person. Similarly, if you've got an idiot-proof how-to video, then it implies that B&Q have had to do this for idiots, not you, idiots in third person. So you've got the third person being used. The only time we've got first person that's used, as far as I can tell, is when it talks about the oven. Other novel introductions include an oven that remembers your last meal. So that is synthetic personalization now. It's also using the second person possessive determiner your. So you don't even need to reset the heat and time if you stick another pizza in. So this is again explicitly talking about you, as in the reader, saying you're one of these people. You will need one of these things. Obviously, using a pizza oven is not as offensive as you don't know how to change a light bulb or you don't know how to clean a toilet. Some of the things that we've talked about in this lesson comparing these texts is how verbs are used as well. So we can look at the distinction between different types of verbs: material verbs, relational verbs, mental and verbal. The basic ones that we need to be aware of are material and relational. So material is where anything physical has happened, where anything has been made or something's been done. Relational verbs, most common being the be verb, i.e. be or is or was or were. They are verbs that nothing has actually been done. Like if you seem happy, you're not doing anything. Whereas if you smile, then you're doing something. So when people say verbs are doing words, that is technically correct, but that's only a quarter of it. So we can think about in the Daily Star article, some of the material verbs that are used. So change light bulbs and clean a toilet. Again, these are real physical processes. These are things you can actually do. So the reader gets that meaning that they are real physical material actions, but also mental verbs. So we've got hopes and remembers. So the idea that the DIY giant B&Q hopes to get more millennials through the door, that mental verb of hope is important here. One thing we can talk about that as well is its personification, because B&Q can't hope for anything. B&Q is the name of a corporation. It can't hope anything. And if you look in the semantic section of the website as well, you'll find what we call metonymy. And metonymy is when you refer to something to actually represent another part of it. So if you refer to B&Q, i.e. the name of the company, but you're referring to the management of the company, as in what the management hope, then that's an example of metonymy. So if you have a look at that, you've probably heard of metaphor before. You might not have heard of metonymy, but if you look through the website, you'll find that there under the semantic section. And then we've also got the mental verb remembers your last meal. So again, you can see how a lot of the Daily Star article is trying to imply through its verb choice that B&Q are almost a paternal figure. They're trying to help. And who are they helping? The snowflakes, this pejorative term. So final thing we'll talk about, if you've not done this already, things that we've covered in this revision video: how a writer uses lexical choices, how it uses lexis to represent things. So either to represent young people as helpless or hopeless, or in the case of Boris Johnson, how he uses lexis to represent Jeremy Corbyn as an enemy, Jeremy Corbyn as an enemy of the people, and also how the people are on the same level as Boris. So he's part of the everyday folk, and that's why he uses those lexical choices. So things that we've done, we've covered what a noun is, what a noun phrase is, how noun phrases can be modified, and then how they can be used to show a particular ideology. Because every text has an ideology, and you can use language to work out how those are being represented.